John Wick Chapter 2 expands the mythology of the first film and offers even more unrelenting action sequences. He even throws in a friendly face from Keanu gone by. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Humor me with just one question. Are you here for the Pope?
This is a movie podcast. We get together and we talk about movies. We are working our way through the John Wick series in time for John Wick Chapter 4. This is going to be Chapter 2. We did the original last week, and we're back for John Wick's second adventure. Will there be more vengeance? Will there be more... I was going to say bodies, but I mean dozens and dozens and dozens of bodies, maybe a more accurate question.
Nope. It's completely peaceful. John Wick finds his inner peace and he doesn't kill anymore. The end. He
spends the movie meditating, yes. He's like a monk in this movie. He doesn't really do anything. Quite right.
Yep.
So we all start spoiler free, as we always do, although it is a sequel, so it is worth mentioning that there'll probably be some casual spoilers to the first one as we even talk about the setup to this one, because just, naturally, it picks up pretty soon after the first one, so there are some very natural ties to it.
Yeah, it's like an indiscriminate amount of time later, but it's clearly within, I'd say probably a month at the absolute longest.
Yeah, I would have guessed like a week, if that. But yeah, it's, a few days later is honestly my guess if I was to pinpoint it. But yeah, so we'll get into John Wick. The first movie, of course, was about this retired assassin who comes out of retirement effectively for revenge because some little punk, some child of a Russian mob boss, kills his dog that was left to him by his dead wife who died of an illness. So he was very upset about that, as you imagine. Perturbed, one might say, and killed a lot of Russian mobsters to get to the bad guy. Yeah.
He also stole his car, which is important for this movie, kinda.
It's a little relevant just for the opening of it, really.
Yeah.
Which... I think, well, I mean, if I'm like talking about this compared to the first one, I think one of the benefits this one has is that it gets to just start with a fun sequence. Like the opening 15 minutes of this is just like, we're going to have fun reintroducing this character. We're going to treat him like he's this mythic hero, and we get what's his name? The actor playing the boss in this scene, Peter something. Peter.
No idea. His name is Abram. I wrote that down because I thought he was going to be important. Joke's on me.
He may be back in the third one. You don't know.
Fair enough.
He always plays like a mobster or like a Stormare. That's his name.
Okay.
People know him from Fargo. He was in Prison Break. He was in the game Until Dawn. Like he's an actor who's popped up. He's very prolific. He's in tons of things. He does often play the same type of criminal because he's just got that kind of face and like voice that he can do.
Right.
I'm sure he's a lovely man. I'm sure he's very pleasant in real life.
Oh yeah.
But he plays this type of character a lot. And he's just here to set up things. And I think, one of my criticisms of the first movie, which I did enjoy, like it is a solid movie, but one of my criticisms was the tone's very dour. And I think this one, despite the fact that it's still very serious most of the time, I think this opening clearly says we're having fun in this world now that we've set things up. And there's just that, it cutting back to him as he knows John Wick's coming, as John Wick's doing a bunch of stuff, and you can just hear screams in the distance. It's a little funny, there's a little bit of just a touch of humor to it, and I don't know, it does a lot for me, I think, to just put me feel, okay, I'm here to have some fun, I'm here to, relatively speaking, turn off my brain. People say that when they're talking about some dumb Michael Bay shit.
Right. That's
not an excuse for terrible storytelling. You can have good storytelling that you have to turn your brain off for, in the sense that, you don't think about we're here for action, we're here for spectacle, we're here for all that stuff. So...
I will say, if we're just getting into the general thoughts on this stuff, I think that maybe it's because, and I don't want to get too much into the setting of this movie, but John Wick is far more passive as a character in this. Things are forced upon him rather than him going out and doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, I don't know, I feel like the action is a little bit weaker. Just a tiny bit. I feel like I got more punch out of the first one knowing that it was John going out and doing these things like he could have stopped at any point and he just chose not to. Rather, in this movie, everything was kind of forced upon him. And there were some good set pieces. There were some good action scenes throughout it. I'm not going to say it wasn't spectacle throughout. It was fantastic, but it just felt like it lacked a little bit of a punch that the first one had. And maybe that's also because having not seen the first one before, now I'm just completely set to that standard. And this didn't blow me away equally as much. I'm not sure, but it just felt like it lacked a tiny little bit compared to the first one for me.
That's interesting, because I think I prefer this one to the first.
Yeah, I definitely prefer this one based off of the storytelling and the reasons he's doing this stuff. I think that it's an interesting world building. Like I view this the same way that I think a lot of Star Wars guys view Empire. In that the first movie, it needed to exist. You had to have it. It was the way that it builds the entire stuff. But this is where they really come out and they build the universe. It's expanding on these themes that were set up in the first one and really going home with basically the entire rest of, we in the first movie we established things like the coins and certain rules that couldn't be broken. This movie takes that and says, okay, you got that, good, and then expands upon it tenfold until it gets a fully fleshed out universe.
Yeah, no, it definitely adds more, and I'd say it uses what was introduced in the first movie to even greater effect. There's some moments in this, specifically the Continental's used a couple of times in this in a really smart way, and we'll talk about that when we get into the spoilers. For me, I think the action is at least as good, if not better, in places than the first one, and I think it's more consistent. One of the things I'd praise this for is that the pacing's far more airtight. I think it. It doesn't have that problem where it feels like it ends and then has like an extra 20 minutes where it's trying to pretend that we should care more about this extra bit at the end. It doesn't do that. If anything, it actually does this great thing where it crescendos to the exact right point, and then there's a little bit after where you're like, okay, what are the consequences for what's happened? And it does a really nice setup for what you presume the third movie is going to be, which, so saving all that for later, obviously. But I think the ending is way better in this one. Like, I think,
yes,
it pays off, not just this movie, but it pays off a lot of things set up in the first movie with its ending, which is cool.
Yeah, I think the only thing that, in terms of comparing it from the last movie, that do you remember Back to the Future 2, where I think it's Jennifer? Am I correct? And that's the girlfriend's
That's
name?
the girlfriend, yeah.
Jennifer gets in the car and then Doc Brown just immediately knocks her out. That's how I feel the writers were with the dog. Yeah. Where they were like, yeah, last movie, he got a new dog, super cute, and he's walking away with them. And then this movie, they're like, oh, but he can't fight with a dog. How do we unload this dog as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I do wonder if they thought they were getting a sequel when they gave him the dog at the end of the first movie.
I don't think they did. And that's why I think that this movie is kind of the Empire to that, where, yes, there were plans for if they did get sequels, how they could expand upon it, but they purposely made it of a one movie thing where they're like, okay, if we're only getting this one, we've wrapped up everything, and in order to wrap up the dog storyline, he had to get another dog.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think there's a nice. I think there's a nice setup that keeps building upon what was previously set up. So the first movie had like a contract put out on John. This one sort of ramps that up and sort of shows how that can escalate to an even greater extent. I wouldn't say it quite gives us like his perfect match, and we get the evil John Wick who's just as good as he is, but we get closer to it. We get people who are a bit more capable in fighting him. I think it's a smart play that the villain in this might be more detestable than the one in the first movie. He's still kind of like he's a different type of weasel, I guess is the way I'd put it. There's a difference to him. But equally, you definitely want to see John get him. Like, I think that's still there, absolutely.
Well, it's in the first movie. It's the issue of, okay, the world consists of everyone who either doesn't know who John Wick is or knows not to mess with John Wick. And when the villain's introduced, he didn't know who John Wick was. And so he messed with him, and that is what the point of the movie is going against him. This is a guy who knew who John was and still decided to mess with him. And that's what makes it just that little bit of escalation of, okay, this guy thinks he's good enough, thinks he's strong enough, either in money or actual just power, to take on John.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing where a little bit of the setup is a little bit like we're just kind of throwing this in and, okay, this is how you're writing the sequel, this is how you're explaining why there's a second story to tell. And yeah, some of it is a bit sequely. Like, I don't necessarily really want to defend that, but once it gets going and the way it kind of like escalates throughout the world that they've built, in that, okay, there's consequences for why he's doing this, and there's consequences, like the reason why John feels sort of entrapped by the situation and why he has to. I thought there was some interesting dynamics where, you know, I mean, the plot of this one, you know, keeping the spoiler-free version here, is just someone from John's past who's also in this world wants him to come out of retirement and assassinate someone, which is different to the first movie, because this is like, no, he is being hired to kill someone, not necessarily innocent, but someone who is not trying to kill him. It's someone who is being killed as a hit job, and that's very much a thing that John gave up and didn't want to be a part of anymore. It's the life he got away from. And while he was murdering a lot in the first movie, it was all out of like a personal purpose. It was never, I'm doing this for money, and he doesn't want to come back.
It was out of vengeance instead of the job.
Yeah, so it's almost like he lost his wife in the first movie, but this movie, the villain is trying to like just straight up take anything he learned or got from the experience of having that normal life with a wife, you know. So
I feel like the closest way you could say it is, you know, if some musician retired or something like that, and they were definitely never going to perform again, it's like, okay, well, you know, respect that. But then they come back for like a one night only thing. You're still going to have people who are like, excuse me, I know you said one night only, but would you mind performing at this other thing?
Yeah, but with, you know, leverage and intimidation and lots of other...
A lot of guns,
yes. The action obviously slick again. It's quite inventive with how it does things. It puts them in a lot more situations, a lot more locations that are inventive. You know, we have locations in Rome that, you know, go from like a rave type setting to like the streets of Rome. We have fights going through public places, onto subway cars. We have lots of variety in that things. There's also a lot more, like, well, specifically the opening is very car chase heavy, and there was a bit of car stuff in the first one, but this is like a proper car chase at the start with a lot more car antics.
It was basically flipping the order of events of the last movie, where the last one ended on a little bit of a car thing. This one opens on a little bit of a car thing. Though I do want to say that I feel like that's part of, not my complaint with the action. I don't, at no point in here, anytime I criticize the action, do I say that it's bad. Absolutely not. It's just I feel weaker than the first one. And I feel that part of that is that they focused more on using the locations as adding that extra bit of difficulty to it. They made sure that the locations were very interwoven to the choreography, but I feel that was at the detriment of the choreography itself. He did less impressive like gun moves. He did less impressive like karate and whatnot. It was more so of how he interacted with his settings.
Okay, I guess. I don't know. I still feel like I noticed a lot of little smart things that he was doing.
I think the thing that got me the most was there was a point in this movie where I noticed about like 4 times over the course of 60 seconds that he did the thing where he flips a goon and just holds them down for a while he shoots other people.
He does that a lot, yeah. That is definitely one of his key moves, for sure.
But that's part where I was like, okay, after the 4th time, you need to change it up. You need to get a little more creative with it.
Yeah. But I think introducing different environments and having to use those environments in some way is how you spice it up. It is how you make it more dynamic and different to what we just saw in the first movie.
It, like I said, it definitely kept it interesting. And the set piece towards the end of this was great to watch visually. But I think that just keeping an eye on the choreography itself, it just seemed a little bit weaker.
Okay. Well, we'll get into all that stuff. A lot of the cast come back, of course, the ones who were, you know, smaller characters like John Leguizamo, Lance Reddick, who's now named as Sharon in this one, as in, you know, Sharon of Death. We'll take you to the afterlife. Very interesting choice of, because he didn't have a title in the first one. The first one, I think he was credited as like hotel like concierge or something like that.
Yeah.
He was not titled in any way. We also obviously have Ian McShane back as Winston, the head of the Continental, at least the New York branch of the Continental, anyway.
Yeah, that I think is the best part of world building in this movie, is the fact that they're like, no, the Continental is a chain. It is a international brand.
Well, I get the sense though that Winston started it, and like the New York is the founding one, and then because they specifically call the Rome one Continental Rome. And I get the impression that they don't say that about New York because that was the first one. That was the Continental.
I'm willing to agree that New York is the first one, but it seems far more ancient of an order that I think Winston's just the current caretaker. I don't think he started it.
Oh, that's fair. Okay, yeah. I mean, if they tell me that, sure, I'll believe it. The way he was talking in this story, he definitely was like, "This is my empire."
Oh yeah, no. If this were any sort of sci-fi bent in this movie at all, I would have almost expected the Rome Continental to just have a clone of Winston running it as well. And he's like, nope, that's me. I'm eternal. I'm everywhere.
Honestly, when we first see the guy running it in Rome, I was like, is that Ian McShane with a goatee?
Yeah, exactly. He's the exact same voice, just with a slight Roman accent.
Yeah. Technically, Bridget Monahan, who played Helen, the wife, is back for like a couple of snippets.
Was it even a couple? I thought I counted one.
Well, no, it was the same scene, but it was like a couple of different snippets of like different moments in the same scene.
Fair.
Right? But I don't think... it could have been just unused shots from the first movie, or they might have actually, like, got her on set to shoot these 2 quick moments of them, like, hugging and kissing.
See, I am happy, though, that they did that. It goes back to, like, the Batman in the Alley problem, where it's how many videos or how many clips of his wife can he actually reasonably have on hand? And obviously, it can be in quite a few, but I'm happy that he has the one that he just keeps on returning to.
Sure. So you got her back, briefly. It says David Patrick Kelly's back as the cleanup guy, but I don't remember seeing him in this.
No, I'm the only time I could think it might have happened is we also get a return of I'm blanking on his name, but the guy Thomas Stahelski as Jimmy, the police officer.
Yeah, he's there briefly at the start, yeah. Or near the
start.
The
only time I could think is that it would maybe be around then, but not. If anything, I think it's probably a deleted scene or something.
Yeah, very possibly. Obviously, our new villain is played by Riccardo Scamarcio?
Scamarcio.
Yeah, Scamarcio. There you go. His name is Santino in the movie. Yeah, so he's a villain. We'll talk about him when we get into the plot and stuff. His main henchman is Ruby Rose.
Yeah.
Which
who her name is Ares, and she is definitely mute. Is she also deaf?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I don't know if it's never used in the movie, I don't think, where he does something and she can't hear it. So I'm going to assume she's not deaf.
Right, because people also just talk to her. They just use normal words. Now, mind you, she can, I'm assuming, read lips, but still, it's never quite brought up as to whether or not she can hear them. Because at one point, John uses sign language back at her, as she uses the whole time. So, I don't know. Could go either way. It's not a huge plot point. But
I mean, this was probably the first thing I ever saw Ruby Rose in, because this was right around kind of her ascension, before she became Batwoman, and then seemingly everyone thought she was terrible to work with on Batwoman. So I don't know what her current standing is in Hollywood, but that's where we are. We also have Common as Cassian, who's like another sort of rival, sort of hitman type dude.
He's that one you're talking about, the closest we get to.
He's the closest,
John Wick.
Yeah. And he's not quite there yet. Like, I feel like there's still room for that, like the ultimate rival who's like mano a mano, but he's definitely much closer than anything we had in the first movie.
I want to meet Wan Jik.
That was terrible. That was absolutely
terrible. You say that as if that's not going to be the like temporary name that they use in the script.
We also, of course, have Laurence Fishburne in a sort of kind of like independent character from the system that's in the movie.
Laurence Fishburne in this movie strikes me as he's going to be very important in the third movie, and they're just setting him up here. That's
relatively fair. Obviously, it's a bit of stunt casting. It's like, hey, we've got Keanu Reeves, we're going to get Laurence Fishburne. This is a little Matrix reunion, and it's pleasant enough. So I mean, that's basically the notable cast. So, I mean, I should probably. I think it was the guy running Rome who was Franco Nero, who's he was like the original Django. Worth mentioning that.
Yes, I believe that was him.
Yeah. I didn't recognize him because he's usually much. I've seen him in Django, but that was like 1966. He looked a bit different at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, actually,
out of
small role. Peter Sarafinovich plays the guy who gives John a lot of guns in Rome.
Yes.
You might know him from Shaun of the Dead. He actually also, I think, did he voice Darth Maul?
Yeah.
I want to say, but he's popped
Darth
up in
Maul. No, there was someone else who was Darth Maul.
No, he was.
Yeah, no.
No, he was. He was either physically Darth Maul or he voiced Darth Maul. I can't remember which it was, but he did one of them.
I'm looking through his history. I don't see it anywhere in Darth Maul.
Yeah, he definitely did.
Oh wait, sorry. I didn't click see all. I didn't realize he had so many roles.
It only went back to 2008.
UL. All right, here we go. No, he was physically Darth Maul in the first.
He was physically
Star
Darth
Wars
Maul.
movie.
Okay. I knew it was one or the other. I can't remember which. I mean, actually, now I'm thinking about it, I don't think Darth Maul spoke, but
yeah, he had one or two lines, but yeah,
maybe he grunted. That kind of. He grunted at one point.
But yeah, no, I definitely recognize him from Shaun of the Dead. But no, out of this cast, I don't think anybody really fails. I think the casting is strong throughout. I honestly think the weakest actor out of the whole thing, and he's still very strong, is probably Riccardo as Santino. Like everyone else is just so locked in on what they're doing.
He's probably the most generic character in that he's just doing this kind of villain. And it was, I think, as an introduction to the character, like, I wasn't sure how to take him at first. Like, it kind of felt like he was just kind of this, like, more comic booky villain for this movie that feels like he's here just to give us a plot. But I have to give the movie credit that by the time we get to the third act and we get to him, what he tries to do to sort of, like, win or get away with things, I'm like, you know what? I actually really want to see him dead now. Like, they've managed to make him...
Yeah.
They've made him Weasley in a very different way to the entitled rich kid in the first movie. And this guy's still very much an entitled rich guy, don't get me wrong, but he's a very different type. He's this guy's more of a power play, politicking... I mean, they keep saying he wants a seat at the table, and it's the table that controls this entire system of hitmen. Which,
again, the world building here.
Yeah.
I adore it and also curse it at the same time.
So,
but yeah, no, he is, by the time, like you said, by the time we get to the third act, I think that it is strictly, I don't want to say the first act, but kind of in the bridge between the first and second act is the only time where I'm like, okay, it seems like they're trying to play the character as a, is he good, is he bad sort of thing. Not, okay, good is a bad way to say that. Is he able to patch things up with John? Is it literally strictly business, or is he out to get John? And by the time you get to the end, it is obvious that it is out to get John. So
yeah, he never came across as good, which is why I'm glad you corrected that, because what he wants John to do is not exactly in any way, reprehensible.
Oh, no. Absolutely not.
So yeah, I mean, the movie's really solid. I think it's paced better than the first one. And I think the world building and the way what I love in movies, and I talked about this in the first one, we were talking about the gun clips and like them actually running out, and they do that again in this one. There's even a plot point at one point where it's like, hey, you have this many bullets and that's all you've got. And I don't want to spoil it, but I've got thoughts on how much I laughed at how they were used. But
absolutely.
In this though is that it's playing with the rules, and I think all the world building that's set up about the coins, a marker, which is interesting, this one, the idea of a marker, which is kind of like an IOU in the Hitman world, effectively. Like that being brought up, and then the rules of that, and the fact that you have to honor under the Continental, and you have to do this and blah blah. Using all these things, and then watching people try and like circumvent the rules, and then like how they try and get around certain things, and it's like, okay, you're safe because you've got a marker, but when that's done, like what happens then? I feel like the way it played with all these things as the movie went on, it always felt like it made sense, and it always felt like there was consequences when things came after. You know, like when the bad guy comes to John Wick and says, "You're doing this," and you've basically got no choice, and like John Wick doesn't want to do it, but he's kind of forced into it, and Ian McShane tells him, "You kind of need to do this, John, but once you do it, you know, you've paid your debt, you're free, blah blah blah." There's a point where Ian McShane straight up looks at the villain and says, you know, you went to John, and when he's done, like, he's free to fucking kill you if he wants to. Like,
my favorite part in that was he was like, he warned you, he told you not to do it, and you still did it.
Yeah.
So
it's part of that wish fulfillment of like John being this unstoppable force, where the idea that if he says don't F with me, if you F with him, you will find out. Like like he will be this unrelenting force coming for you, and it never drops that. He always feels like he's doing that, and I think you get to just enjoy the fun of it a little bit more in this one versus the first one. So
yeah, I mean, going back to what you said about the rules, I think it's a saying, at least I hope I'm not making this up, where you need to know the rules, you need to understand why they're there in order to break them.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I say that about the rules of filmmaking, never mind like the context of a story. Yeah, exactly.
But no, it does a great job of, it lays down across both movies now. It says, okay, here's how the coins work. It explains, here's how the marker works. It explains the rules of the Continental, of all these different things. It lays it out very cleanly, and the people play by the rules up to a point. And then they start tiptoeing over the line. They start breaking the rules. And that's what makes for the good drama, where it's a matter of, if everyone played by the rules 100% of the time, then there's always a place to hide behind. There's always some way that they can get out of it. It's only once the rules are stripped away that it becomes okay, now it's interesting.
Yeah, so I think with that said, we'll get into the movie. So spoilers for John Wick Chapter 2.
One more thing.
Okay.
And it can kind of be under spoilers as well. There's a scene that is the set piece of this movie that is set completely in a hall of mirrors.
Yes.
The only thing that was going through my mind is how many VFX artists had to work for how long to erase the cameras from all of those mirrors.
There is no chance in hell that this was just done completely like
Absolutely
in camera
not.
Without like at the very least there was a bit of trickery to remove, because like you can get away with a mirror in a scene, like, you know, you just angle the camera so you don't see the camera and the reflection. But you have a hall of mirrors, and you have shots where the camera's looking right into a mirror, and like there's trickery here. There has to be trickery.
Yep. Which does bring me to the point of, I wonder what the comparison is between VFX, between the first movie and this one. Because between the hall of mirrors scene, and also the fact of, maybe I'm just forgetting, but does it seem like this movie really played up the blood splatters a lot more than the last one? I feel like last movie they had a few main shots. There was specifically the guy who's playing video games and got sniped in the head. Like, they played that up for blood and gore. That was a big one. But this one, I felt every time that he shot anybody in the head, there was a nice little cloud of smoke and a stain on the ground, which I don't remember in the last movie.
It's satisfying.
Absolutely.
I'll say that. No, I mean, maybe they had a bit more to work with in this time. Do you know what I will say, though, that you've brought that up, is that I think it's a testament, even if they did have more money, and maybe that allowed them to do something like the Hall of Mirrors, where they could, you know, use FX to, you know, hide after the fact, like how they shot it, because it was going to show up no matter what.
Right.
I think I would commend it for never feeling like they're doing action that feels inappropriate to what you expect of John Wick. I think the worry would be is that you end up doing, I mean, to compare it to the last franchise we did, you end up going down a snowy mountain in a truck or something. You know, it never does action that feels inappropriate to the type of action that John Wick is. Even if technically there's more money being spent to pull it off because of the locations they're in, the actual combat and the way he's doing things always feel like it's true to what John Wick is. As opposed to all of a sudden he's like, I don't know, like diving out a plane and parachuting and like dodging rockets in the air or whatever it could be, you know?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a they recognize that the gold in their franchise is the fight scenes being this gritty, realistic, like, here's how a guy who is at peak performance could handle all of these fights. And I think that this movie only dances on the line one time, and that is the walking down the hallway with silencers scene.
Oh yeah, no, that's fair. It's not even a hallway. You say hall. It's like the terminal of a train station, and there's people all around. And silencers do dampen the sound of a gun. They do not make it literally silent, where you can fire in a crowd of people and no one will notice.
Yeah, no, and that's another thing in this movie, which I feel maybe it's because I don't live in the inner city. I don't have to worry about this sort of thing that often. But I feel like if I heard as many gunshots as I heard there, I wouldn't be able to walk over to the next block and see people just going about their day as usual.
Yeah, there's definitely, but that's less about that's a different thing to what we were talking about before. Though this is just like a believability thing where you're letting them away with this not being quite realistic in the background. Yeah. That's about realism. I was talking about like the scale of the action and the type of action that it was.
The problem was it was the exact same scene where both things happened. Yeah. So it just came up, and I was like, there's a lot I'm having to forgive here, but it's a cool scene, so I'll give it.
But you're not forgiving like dodgy visuals. You're just forgiving like people in the background. The extras not reacting appropriately to what's going on. Yeah, that's really what you're commenting here. But yeah, so spoilers for John Wick Chapter 2. We'll get into it. The opening of the movie, which has, it's a nice setup, especially if you haven't seen the first movie. Peter Stormare's character is apparently the brother of the villain in the first one, because he mentions his nephew killed the dog.
Yeah, so just off the bat here.
Yes.
When this started, I was like taking copious notes. I was like, okay, he's the brother, and we're going through all this, and I'm writing down everything, all the relations that are going on, because I assume they're all going to be very important. They literally have a shot where they go over very slowly this guy's nameplate on his desk, just so I'm sure I caught the name. And I'm like, all right, I get it. It's important. And then...
See, you're really annoyed about this because you were thinking it was going to be important and taking notes, but I actually like the ending of this segment, which is...
Oh, yeah, no. I thought it was great.
John Wick gets to him after killing, like, all of his men and pours him some booze and just basically says, like, are we good? And the guy's like, yeah, we're good. Which is actually quite smart, because the whole point of this movie is that the villain who then interrupts John's life and says, no, you're coming back, he has to sort of like exploit him and can't let it go and tries to like, whereas this guy's smart enough to go, you know what, peace, like I don't care that you killed my brother, you killed my nephew, you did all these things, I recognize that this is not personal to me, you just want your car back, because his front for his business is he's got this like taxi auto shop, and John Wick's car happens to be here, and he's like, yeah, take your car, we're good. Like he's like, and he knows, but the way it sets it up here, where he's like explaining to his like henchman who John Wick is, he's the boogeyman, he's this, he's that, and he says, he
literally quotes the exact same speech.
Yeah, and if anything, the stories have been watered down. Like this is not a case of they've been exaggerated; they've been watered down. And as this is happening, we see John Wick coming to his place, but he's always like out of focus or in silhouette. It takes a while before they do the face reveal where he walks out of the shadow and you see Keanu's face. And then we get a series of fun action scenes. I would, it's a lot of car stuff where he's in his car. His car, which he gets back, ends up getting wrecked, which more in the comedy beat that follows with that in a second. But
I love that so much.
But he's at one point he spins the car so that when he spins it, the back of the car hits someone. So it's like a 180 spin into a hit. My favorite part of it might be once John Wick's door's gone, so he's driving without a door, and someone hits the front of the car, and he literally just falls out the side of the car, and it's a great shot. It looks really good.
Oh yeah, that's one of the ones where it looks so simple, but I guarantee you there was a whole like backing rig so that they could do it legitimately.
Oh yeah,
so they could actually have him come out of the car.
It was it's very simple to look at, but yeah, you get the feeling like to actually pull this off, either there's a lot of FX going on to make it work convincingly, or there's a lot of other safety things like either way it looked good. And fundamentally it's all about car with ragdoll physics for the humans. That's what this segment was.
So I absolutely loved in this segment how he gets his car, and mind you, this is a chop shop. Like, it is cutting up these cars, and like they're also transporting those gold coins that we saw used by the hitman, along with just blank cash.
Well, he's getting rid of all them because he knows John Wick's coming. I think that was the implication.
Right. Yeah, it's because his brother had it all burned. But I love how in this movie his car still has a dust cover on it. It's in pristine condition. Like, it is absolutely perfect. And then within 3 minutes, it is just a wreck, and there's nothing left of it. And he's like, all right, well, why'd you even bother showing up for it then?
Well, yeah, because there's literally a comedy beat when it cuts to him arriving back at his house, and the car's like just sort of like creaking into frame, and it's like, you know, it's falling apart. There's no doors. The windows are all smashed. It's you know, and that basically, I mean, you can see him briefly at the end reacting to something, but John Leguizamo's character only shows up for this scene where he's like, so you want me to fix this car? Yeah, I could have it fixed by about 2030. Yeah, I could do that. Which, to be fair, if we're getting a new trilogy of movies starting with Chapter 4, Chapter 6 is going to be him getting that car back. It's going to be right around that time. Is that a trilogy? I thought 4 and 5 were greenlit. I don't know if there's a 6.
Okay, well, fair enough.
I could be wrong.
He's still not going to have his car then. Oh well.
Yeah, 5 comes out in a couple of years. Yeah, we'll stop. They can keep going. They can go until he's about 70, because we hit 2030, he'll get his car back.
Eventually, we're going to hit the point where he just crosses over with Dirty Harry.
And somehow Clint Eastwood will still be alive.
Somehow.
He'll be 110 years old, but he'll still be there. Oh, dear. So no, I think this opening was great. It was a really fun sequence that built up the mystique of John Wick again in a sort of condensed format, because, you know, we've seen the first movie already, but it's a refresher for those of us who have seen the first movie. It's an introduction for those who haven't. It's kind of fun. It's just a little more cartoony in a good way. You know, it's a little bit more comic booky with this more over the top villain, and the way he's got this big cigar, but he's scared of John Wick, and they mention Baba Yaga, they mention the killing the 3 people with the spoon. Whatever it was. Pencil. Yeah. What you see him do later on. Yeah, they specifically say in this, it's like he once killed 3 men, and the other guy interrupts like, with a pencil. I know. I've heard the story. Which is a bit meta when you think about it. It's like the audience. We've heard this story. It's like, yes, coming into Chapter 2, we've seen Chapter 1. We know. We've been there. Yeah. But no, but it's still valid to make those reminders, because, I mean, you have to assume that if people have seen it, it might have been a couple of years. I mean, they might not have seen it since it came out, and that's a valid thing. No, I think that this opening does a good job of, you may not get all of the emotion that went into the first movie, all the reasons that he was on this quest, but it still gives you enough, if you are coming into this new, that you understand what he's capable of. You didn't have to go through the whole arc of, you know, his wife, his dogs, all that stuff. You come into this and you just need to know John Wick is capable of killing anything that is alive. Yeah. And then just continue from there. And he goes home. He's happy. He's content. He's got his dog. He's looking at his wife's photos, and he has some cement, which you commented he needed. I actually started laughing during that scene because I forgot that you actually see him cementing his stuff back up in this movie. I was just crying. I didn't remember that when I said that last episode. So I did like the small detail, though, that there was a photo of his wife in the car's glove compartment, and the implication almost that that's why he really wanted it back is that there was a... Yeah, that he didn't care about the car itself, it was what was in it. Yeah, that made some sense to me. It was like, and that's why I think it's effective in 10 minutes' time when our new villain burns down his house with a grenade launcher and burns all of his wife's photos and everything, all the memories of her all gone. Like, it's basically like, you can't have this normal life, we took it from you. And don't get me wrong, it's not as emotionally effective as killing the dog in the first movie, but I do think it shows you just how entitled this prick is, especially since after he still tries to sort of like, when John goes to see him the second time, and he's like, look, John, if you complete your marker, this is all over, and we can act like professionals and like adults. And I'm like, you took a grenade launcher to his house. You effed up, dude. Like, he's coming for you. Like, you have no chance. It just strikes me as somebody who like slaps you in the face and then says like, slapping is below us. Okay, let's just go ahead and call this even. Yeah, he's so slimy. Because when he first shows up and like John has to treat him with respect, and he's like, hey, you owe me, I helped you build all this by letting you go.
I do like how, yeah, they called in that one little detail before of how in order to get out, he had to do an impossible task.
Yeah.
And apparently this guy is the one who helped him complete that impossible task, which it would make sense that that's why he gave this guy an IOU, because it is literally the most important thing in John Wick's life. So he felt like, no, okay, I'm giving you this.
Yeah, Santino repeatedly says that he wouldn't have asked if John had just stayed retired. I don't believe him for a second. I don't believe.
Oh no.
Yeah, I don't think for a second that he's only doing this because he knows John's back in the game to an extent.
I believed him right up until he blew up John's house, and I was like, okay, well, you came prepared. Like this was always going to happen.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not even like some time passes and he's getting mad and you're waiting for him to strike. He goes out to his car as soon as John turns him down and just pulls a grenade launcher out the car, and that's it. Mm-hmm. It just starts firing it like it's nothing. Although I did love there was a moment when the house was on fire. I'm like, wait, did that dog die in this explosion? Because I feel like
yeah.
So, but they make a point of showing the dog come up and lick John immediately. Just like, no, the dog. We didn't do it again. We promise. We didn't kill the dog again.
I have a feeling like I know they don't actually show this, but I have a feeling Santino was like looking around. He's like, okay, I see the dog over in the west wing of the house, so I'm just gonna fire to the east because I know what happens next if I kill that dog.
Yeah, but I think, it does work even though it's not as impactful, I think, to the audience because it's not killing a dog. I think when you stop and think about all of the memories of his wife, and including that like bracelet or whatever it was on his nightstand, including all the photographs, the house that he shared with his wife, it's all gone. Like this entire life has effectively been erased by this prick because he thinks he owns John.
Oh yeah, and I also like the fact of they worked with what they had. Like they specifically showed the bracelet as being something that was destroyed here, rather than coming up with like, oh no, my wife's photo book that I just looked at for the first time in this movie. Yeah. No. It's like, no. We know the things that are important to him, and we have only destroyed those things visually.
Yeah. So after some cement work, of course, villain shows up, tells him that he wants him to kill someone. Doesn't even get to who in this scene. He doesn't find out until John goes and sees him. Because John goes to the Continental next and leaves his dog with Lance Reddick, which again, comedy beat at the end, where it's just that wide shot of him staring down at the dog like...
I don't think any movie or show can pull off as many comedy beats with Lance Reddick as this one can.
Yeah, he's got a few. And it's usually just him reacting quietly to whatever absurd request John or someone other characters made.
Yeah.
Because at the end he's like, he was a good dog, I enjoyed his company, but it's so stoic. You're like, what did you sit and like read him the Financial Times, Lance?
I would pay to see, you know how Marvel has those little shorts that go with their movie releases?
Oh yeah.
I would pay to see a short of what Sharon did with the dog during this span of this movie.
Yeah. But he goes to see Ian McShane, goes to see Winston, and explains what's happened. And Winston, again, Mr. Exposition for the audience, but I don't mean that in a bad way, but he very much once again explains he's got a marker that you agreed to. Because even, and I like that he sort of says, like, why did you give a marker to that prick of all people? He's like very clear, like, why would you do that? And he's like, no, he helped me get out of the, like, blah, blah. We explained that he had the impossible job, this was his way out, and he took it. And he's like, you know what happens if you refuse the marker, if you try and fight it, the table will come for you, the entire system will come for you. So you have to do this, but once you've done it, you can be free. So John reluctantly, and he's walking around at this point, ever since his house blew up, he's walking around kind of like looking like a homeless person. He's got this like white like shirt on that's kind of dirty, and he's kind of he's not in the suit, he's not looking smart. He looks kind of low and down. And he goes to see the villain, Santino, who's opening like a fancy art gallery or something. So he goes in and talks to him. Turns out Santino wants his sister killed because his sister was given their father's seat at this table.
So I at this point in the movie, like, I just stopped taking notes because I was like, all right, you're dropping a whole bunch of lore here and I'm just going to be fully invested. I'm not going to bother writing it down.
Sure.
It is... So during the Winston conversation, they make it specifically clear that the Continental belongs to Winston, and he's like the rule guy for that.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, these markers belong to the High Table, which as far as I can tell is just the leaders of each of the crime families for like every country.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. And when we say crime families, we mean like the big upper class crime families, like the ones who are running the systems that are in place.
Right. So it's like 12 of them, I think, and his father was the Italian one, so his sister is taking over the Italian crime family.
Yeah.
And he wants in. And somehow both of them, both Winston and the Continentals, as well as the High Table and the Markers, are all part of a much larger just hitman conglomerate where you're part of this group and it's you literally are a member in this group. It's not a thing of you're a hitman, therefore you're automatically in this group. It's a thing where you have to be let into this group. And they never quite explain how that happens, but they definitely show what happens when you get kicked out. So
I mean, we even saw that in the last movie with Perkins or whatever her name was. So I think this scene, gives you a lot of this villain and how much of a slimeball he is, and that he's very matter of fact about the fact that he wants his sister killed, because he just says, you know, she's got this seat and I think I could do quite well given that opportunity. And it's that simple. This is purely a political play for the seat. It's not this, like, you know, passionate revenge thing. I'm sure he's bitter. I'm sure he's emasculated because his sister was given the power and he wasn't. But it sort of gives you a sense of who the character is.
But it also makes the point that he needs John, because even John says this is impossible. This is not able to be done because of how high profile and how important she is.
Yeah, she's one of the table. She's one of the 12 at the table. And, you know, she's in Rome right now. And
for her coronation.
Yeah, so it's like, this is why I needed the ghost. This is why I need John Wick. So John reluctantly is going to do this to, like, deal with his marker and get once again get. So he's trying to get free. He's trying to go back to his normal life, and the system just won't let him. So he goes to Rome, and we get this idea that along with your membership to the Continental, you get access to a lot of things. You get access to a fancy
world building.
You get access to a tailor who'll make you a suit that's got a polymer in it that's bulletproof. You'll get access to a gunsmith or whatever.
The sommelier.
Yeah, he'll give you a bunch of weapons, and you know, I could have maybe done without the sort of like the glorifying of the guns themselves a little bit. Like, you know, I kind of. It's the one scene in the movie where I was like, later on when it's the other gun that's only got 7 bullets, I'm like, no, this is a plot point. This is mechanics. This is important. There's a little bit where they're just going through the weapons he's going to be using, and it's just a little bit, you know, like gun wankery, I guess.
Well, see, they do it, but they purposely phrase it as if he is like, just because the sommelier is someone who's very good with wines.
Yes.
That's the wine master. So they treat it the exact same way, where it's like, okay, and what do I do for after the main course? And he's like, oh, well, this thing.
Yeah.
So I liked a little wordplay there, but because I knew Laurence Fishburne was coming up because of what you said, and because the sommelier, the tailor, all that sort of stuff, this was just Matrix Reloaded again. Like, it's just the blank and all of these roles where they do a very specific thing, and it's just Matrix Reloaded again.
It's much better than Matrix Reloaded.
It is, but it's just because that movie also did the same thing for the Matrix universe in the world building and setting up, here's how these different aspects of the Matrix works. And while, yes, I agree it was done much poorer, I just kept on seeing these parallels to it where they just kept on doing the same sort of things.
I can see the comparison you're making, but I think the difference is that series was just that movie, sorry, Reloaded was a series of MacGuffins. It was like, you need to get to this thing or this person to get to this next thing, and that's all it was. Here, everything's clearly motivated by the previous, you know, you can see how it all fits together, it all flows, and the momentum's there. So, you know, he gets his stuff, he gets his suit, he looks quite spiffy.
Which, on the topic of the suit, how did you feel about that? How did you feel about the fact that every time he came into a scene now, he's just like holding up his jacket like this because now he's bulletproof?
It's, I think it feels like a device to get around the fact that he's going to be getting shot at. And at a certain point, it's unbelievable that he's getting hit. So they've decided to go with something else, which is, we'll explain it by having a bulletproof suit. You know, we'll say it still hurts, but it'll stop bullets from hitting him. Yeah,
I guess, I mean, by the time the movie progressed, they showed a bunch of different, like, ways that he's being attacked. I was more okay with it because there were people attacking him with just knives. There were people attacking him stealthily where he wouldn't have the ability to get his suit up.
Yeah.
But I do think it is in that first scene where he's really taking advantage of it. It kind of sucks a little bit out of it of like, okay, but like he can't die here. He's not only because of the pacing of the movie, but like I don't believe he could even get seriously injured because this suit is here.
Yeah, I guess in a lot of ways I kind of feel like he's got that anyway from the writing standpoint, so the suit just kind of makes it literal.
I'm trying to ignore the meta point where I look at the search bar of the movie and I say, oh, we still have an hour and a half left. I hope he doesn't die here.
I mean, he was presented as such an unstoppable badass that I guess it doesn't really affect me too much. It's one of those things, though, where this one definitely does just put us on that line of, like... You know, because when you bring up realism, like I wouldn't necessarily say John Wick's realistic. It's just it just feels more real in the fights themselves because it feels like there's a lot of tactics involved and there's a lot of skill involved. Yeah. This one definitely goes a little bit further in the sense that okay, we're introducing like tech that feels maybe slightly
perfect silencers.
Yeah, perfect. But that. But they don't introduce that though. That's just a thing that all movies do, is that silencers are perfectly quiet. That's not a John Wick specific thing. Whereas, no, this suit has polymer inside it, which is completely bulletproof. You know,
I guess for me it's because last movie he was also shot at like incredibly high amounts of time, and then he only ended up actually getting shot like maybe twice or three times over the course of the movie.
Yeah. So
it just feels like, well, then why can't he just do it again?
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't really bother me, but it wasn't something that I really cared about in the first place either. So
I just felt like it was weird that if they didn't bring it up, I wouldn't have questioned it. Like, okay, he's just managing to dodge these shots, but because they brought it up, I was like, okay, but how much can that actually really do?
I mean, the realism of it and the believability of it actually stopping bullets, like, I don't think it can. I think it's nonsense, but I don't really care. I think what I think works in the movie is that they set it up and then him lifting the jacket to actually help block bullets from a certain direction shows him using it based on the rules that have been established in the movie. They tell me it works this way, I'll accept that, and as long as the character uses it accordingly, I can more or less get behind it.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say that it got weird
because his shirt's not bulletproof, and we see that when someone stabs him. I think in the in the stomach at one point.
Yeah, and I will say that this movie, one of my few criticisms I had last time, I wouldn't say criticism, but one of the things I pointed out last time is they never explained why everybody's in suits. At least this explains why John's in a suit.
Oh sure, yeah. I don't know. They're upper class crime. Everyone's in a suit. What you want from me?
Fair enough.
So he has to go to this concert where the sister's going to be, and he actually gets in quite easy. One thing I did like though is we see him planting like his different guns, because he's got like a machine gun, a shotgun, and he's got a pistol on him, and we see him planting the guns like in the cave system underneath Rome. And I think what I like about this is later on when he uses these guns, he's not actually fighting like the people defending the sister or her people. He's fighting against Ruby Rose because obviously the bad guy wanted John killed on the way out so that there'd be no loose ends, right? And
I mean, you say that, but he is fighting against the people defending her as well.
I don't think in the caves he is. I think in the caves it's
probably not in the caves.
It's just Ruby Rose's people.
All out by that. Yeah.
Because Cassian comes back into it once he gets back up to the street level, but I think in the caves it's just her. It's just her and the other Santino guys. But I think what I like about that is that, to me, like, you could say he just expected to be chased by the people protecting her, and that's why he planted the guns here. But I kind of like to think that he actually kind of saw the double cross coming, and he was like prepping his entire route back with like defenses, and this was like all like him just being really strategical. But he goes to the concert thing. He actually gets in relatively easy, other than the one moment where he passes Cassian by, and he's actually that's
on the way out.
That's on the way out. Who is it? Oh no, it's the head of the Continental Rome who says, "Are you here for the Pope?" And he's like, "No." In that case, we're all right. Like he would have a problem if he was here to assassinate the Pope. That's
a bit too high profile.
That's where he draws the line. But he just shows up, and the sister knows who he is. Like immediately, like there's some familiarity there, which makes sense given that he also knew the brother. He knew Santino, and she makes this choice, knowing that she's not going to get away. John Wick's good at what he does. She's in a room alone with him. She makes a choice to get into jacuzzi or whatever it is, and slit her wrists and kills herself. And then John like makes this choice to shoot her in the head, and you can read this one of two ways. You can read this as like he's ending her pain a bit quicker, or you can read it as a sort of technicality where he's making sure that he's the one who actually dealt the killing blow.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how to assume that, because I mean, if she dies on the night of her coronation, as John was contracted to do, it's not that he has to prove it was him. Like, clearly nobody else was going to do that.
Yeah.
There's no reason she would have died otherwise. So that makes less sense for me, that it's a technicality. He has to prove that he did it. But also at the same time, I feel like slowly bleeding out is not a horrible way. Like, it's not a painful way to go, I don't think. More so than a gunshot to the head. I don't know. The fact that he shot her, especially after they had that whole, we used to be friends once, and he's I still consider us friends.
You think a gunshot to the head isn't painless?
Okay, no. A
gunshot to the head's the quickest, like, sudden way to go.
But the big fat guy who attacked John later on got a shot to the head, and he got back up. So I don't want to hear that.
Okay, 1 second. Like, I think bleeding out is going to feel worse than just an instant gunshot to the head.
I'm not here to discuss the merits on the easiest way to die. That's not exactly why I'm here. All I'm saying is that it seemed out of place. I can't think of any good reason as to why it needed to happen.
I think he was just ending her suffering, to be honest.
That's fair.
I think it was as simple as that.
But based off of, like, she didn't do a tiny little cut and say, like, okay, I'll be dead in 4 to 5 hours. Like, she did full up and down her whole arms, both arms, to the point where her entire body was just covered in blood. She was out within the time that he would have been able to walk out of the room.
At which point, I don't think it's a big deal that he shoots in the head, then, is it?
The only part that makes it seem weird to me is they had that whole conversation of how he still considers her a friend. That's what took it out of place for me. Is like, no, this is strictly business on his end.
Which
so
again,
I feel like
that again just proves the point that he's putting her out of her misery. He's just making it end quickly.
All right. You say so.
I'm not sure why this is confusing.
Like, she's not. For me, it's that she's not sitting there going like, it hurts so much. It's like, no, she's just fading away. That's all it is.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's still not that pleasant. He's putting her out of her misery.
It is such a non-plot point, though. I'm willing to concede.
I don't know what the problem is. But another part of this though is that she kind of like brings up, what would your wife think of like you doing this now? Like, she sort of like pokes that question, and I think if there's much of an emotional backbone to this story, it's the idea that John's been dragged back into this world when he didn't want to be, and this idea of like what would his wife think if that he's doing any of this now? Like, he's becoming this kind of unstoppable monster again.
I mean, it purposely pokes the point there because as soon as the marker is done, as soon as he completes this kill, technically he does not need to kill another person.
No, he could just walk away at this point. Yeah.
In order to survive, he does. But it does pose that question of, now that he's pulled back in again, is he going to choose to leave? Because there's nothing for him on the other side. And they bring that up throughout the entire movie as to whether or not he wants to be here now.
Yeah, but he's already got a reason to want revenge on Santino. He's going to have even more of one in a couple of minutes. Before he gets to Ruby Rose in the Caves, though, he does cross paths with Cassian, who we meet for the first time.
Played by Common.
Yeah, I think we see him with the sister briefly before now, but
yeah,
this is the first time. Yeah, this is the first time we actually get to speak to him and stuff. And again, it's that very sort of pleasant, kind of like professional. Hey John, hey Cassian, are you working? Yep. And he's like, what was the line he said? Is it a good night? I think he said.
Yeah, he's just like, so good night.
He's like,
afraid so.
Which is basically, you've done it already. And then the fight breaks out, and in front of a lot of people as well. So you get like John fighting this guy, and then a few other goons on his way out. Which
he kills a guy on stage, and the crowd just cheers because they think it's part of the show.
But he's shooting people throughout the. He goes through a few locations up top throughout the rave, taking people out. Gets out of the caves, And he thinks he's away, but then of course Ruby Rose is there with a squad of guys, and it's like, yeah, she's here to like kill him so that all the loose ends are gone. And John has to fight his way through the cave. And I think what was interesting about this is the idea that he, like, his fighting style changes depending on the type of gun he's using, because we mostly just see him using a pistol in the first movie, and up until this point in this film it's also just a pistol. But as this fight progresses and he switches to the machine gun, but especially when he switches to the shotgun, which is a lot more difficult to reload. So he's got this method, and one of my favourite moments of this whole fight is when he actually has some guy pinned up against the wall holding the shotgun to his chest, and then has to quickly reload with the other hand while he's still pinning the guy against the wall, and then fires off the shot. That's where like the mechanics and like the stuff comes into it, where you're like, okay, that was fun because it was...
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's as we said last time, those limitations that they impose on themselves to come up with creative fight scenes. That entire cave thing is that on display, where they have a specific type of gun and they give him a certain amount of bullets before he has to go to the next gun, and then that gun comes with its own limitations as well. And they just keep on.
There's one point where he's got the shotgun on someone and it runs out of ammo and he can't reload it, so he pulls out the pistol with his other hand and shoots him with that. It's just little things like that.
There's one fight scene, and I'm just going to bring it up now. There's one fight scene, I think it's right before the mirror hall thing, where he runs out of bullets and he throws the gun at someone's head. Yeah,
I actually love that. He runs out of bullets and just throws it at his face.
Yeah,
like that's the tactic.
That's perfect. That's exactly... Here I have an empty weapon and a guy running at me with a gun. What do I do?
Hey, it's made. It's a gun's a heavy thing. It's made of metal.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
You can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball. Same with a gun.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't even know what fight scene this moment was in, since we're just on fight scene moments, because I have no idea which one this was. But he ended up like pulling a guy's head back and like sort of shooting him through the head, but from behind. Like he pulled his head back with his hair and pointed the gun up from the back of his head and shot him that way.
I can't. I remember them. I could see it, but I can't remember where it is.
Yeah, I like there's a lot of little moments where it's hard to place what fight scene they were in, but because there's a few of them in the movie. But that scene stuck out to me. But yeah, he's fighting his way out of all these guys. He gets up to the street. That's when Cassian shows back up again with his car, and they end up sort of like fighting. They're ducking a lot of innocent cars in the city are getting their windows smashed in with them firing their guns at each other. And it's very kind of like they're just like going down a street and they're the opposite ends of the same cars and just kind of like ducking and diving.
They keep on doing the thing where one character has a gun and they're just trying to angle it enough to shoot the guy, but then the other character is aware of that, and so they're keeping their arm facing forward. And it's a lot of empty shots fired off where they're unable to connect. But this is where I feel it gets the closest to the anti-John Wick, where it shows two people of essentially the same caliber and fight strength.
And this is where, because when I said in the last review that I remember them using the Continental even better in the second one, this was one of the things I was talking about, where this fight, like, John Wick was on his way to the Continental in Rome when he gets attacked by Cassian, and the fight sort of continues in that direction, and they actually end up going through the window into the Continental, and as soon as they land in the Continental, the guy, the head of the Continental in Rome is like, hey, gentlemen, and they stand up.
Rule number one, guys.
They stand up and they apologize and they agree to go to the bar and get a drink to sort of cool down. And it just... and it was smart from like a writing the sequel point of view, and like, yeah, Ian McShane said it earlier, but let's show the audience like how much they adhere to this rule, that they were in a fight to the death, but because they crossed this border, they went through this window, they crossed this line on the ground, and now they're in the Continental, they agree to stop fighting and play nice, and immediately they do it. And it shows you kind of how adherent to the rules that John is, the fact that this villain's maybe not the right term here. He's an antagonist in that he obviously wants John dead now because he killed his person, but he's not necessarily someone who's doing this in a petty... You respect Cassian a lot more than any other villain in the movie because he's more...
It's all about the idea of he has a code.
Yeah. So this reminds you of how important this rule is, because later on when John breaks it, it's going to feel like a big deal, and this is partly why it feels like a big deal, is because they've used it here. But it also sets up the idea that if someone wants to be safe, they might run to the Continental to stop, to stop the threat in their life. More on that later. So this is very smart setup for the end of the movie, all this stuff.
Yes, absolutely. And it doubles down on it as well, because not only is John sharing a drink with Cassian, but the whole time in the background of the scene, Ruby Rose's character is also just sitting there. Like,
yeah, it does that thing where Cassian walks out a shot and then just reveals her sitting behind them.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, on the couch.
They actually they showed her sitting in the shot the entire time, because I noticed her maybe about like 20 seconds into the scene. I'm like,
oh sure, yeah.
Is she going to be there at the end of this, or is this like a nice little Easter egg that I'm catching where she's just sitting there and then disappears in a later shot? But no, she's there the whole time. And this is, I think, the last moment where there was a brief period in there where it was three-sided, where it was John against the sisters' people against Santino's people. And after this scene, Cassian is kind of still representing the sisters' people as like a third party, but for the most part, he just falls in line of the world against John Wick.
Well, yeah, because as soon as John gets out of this situation, Santino calls him and says, well, you have to understand, John, that I was going to have to deal with you, right? And
he just hangs up.
John just hangs up, which feels fitting, because that was remember in the last movie where the bad guy called him and John didn't say anything. This felt like just another version of that. Yeah. And immediately Santino calls in the contract, and we get to see a little bit of how this works.
World building. That's honest to God, that's just all this movie is this is, I don't want to say a masterclass, because there are little points where it gets fuzzy, but this is, I think, the best I've seen of explaining how a world works without just grabbing your audience by the hand and saying, okay, now pay attention to what the man on screen's about to say. Like, it just shows you this, and it walks it through in a simple enough terms that it makes sense without anybody coming in and saying, oh, I placed the order with the main office or whatever.
Well, I mean, because in the first movie, the bad guy put out a $2 million contract on John, and we hear about it, and we know it's happening. This movie, we see the bad guy phone the operator, and we see like the paperwork being drawn up, and it goes through the system, and we see that it gets sent out to all the assassins' phones and says, hey, there's an open contract on John Wick for $7 million. And it sets that up. And it becomes this thing where John gets back to New York after being in Rome, and as soon as he arrives, like, it sort of it intercuts like multiple fights, because I think when the call goes out, we see a bunch of people looking at phones. We see like a violinist, like this woman looking at her phone. We see a big fat guy looking at his phone. And when John arrives in New York, it sort of intercuts him interacting with all these characters, where he's been attacked seemingly constantly since he's arrived, and he's like fighting for his life the entire way. And it escalates to the point where Cassian shows up. And honestly, I want to point out something here. There's a really, like, the movie looks great. I think it looks better than the first movie. The way it uses colors.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Even in the opening scene when he just gets out the car, when he's sort of hit the guy with the car, just the different colors of the neon lights and the street lights hitting the ground, the wet ground. It's always a wet ground in a movie for whatever reason, but it always is. It looks great. There's one shot here, and I assume it's because they had to go back and get it, but it was too expensive to go back to the location where the fountain was, where they're having the stare down. But there's a really dodgy green screen shot of like a close-up of John Wick looking at him, and I'm like, that is so like a composite. There is no way he was standing there when they shot that.
I don't know I think it's like a blurry edge on Keanu's face, but I can't place, but it's definitely obvious. And they don't do the smart thing and just hold it there for like a half a second. They hold on it for a good like 3-4 seconds to really lay in the drama. Because
they're there obviously for the wide shots. I can only assume that they realized there was something wrong, or they needed a close-up that they didn't have, and it was just too expensive to go back to this public place in New York or wherever they shot this particular scene.
Which, like, I get, but at the same time, it's purposely zoomed in on the face, and the background is so out of focus that I feel like you could have put anything back there and it would have worked, but for some reason they green screened it.
I feel like just putting like something that looks like a neon light and then just have some extras walking back and forth out of focus would have probably done it. But instead they've green screened it or whatever, and it looks it looks like something someone's done with like an app on TikTok where they've said, oh hey, now I've got this background behind me. That's what it looked like. It looked really bad.
It's the zoom thing where your entire background turns blurry, but then you put up your hand and it's like crap.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just one little shot, but it looks so bad, and it clearly it's not something I assume it's not intentional. It's just they had to accept this because whatever reason.
One scene that just a little bit jumped over is when I keep on forgetting his name, Santino. I would keep on wanting to say Santoni.
It's because his last name is D'Antonio.
Yeah,
It's D'Antonio.
Santino D'Antonio. Anyway, because John completed the marker, he's brought in by Winston, and he's like, okay, sign it away. He did the job. And Santino's like, you do realize John's probably going to be like dead by the time he gets home? Like, I've put out this big hit on him. And then Winston's just like, yeah, sure. Anyway, sign the thing.
Yeah,
like he knows John is like not going to die from any of this.
Oh yeah, this is the scene where Winston's like, look, you forced them into this. You're going to deal with the consequences, you little shit. Like that's what this scene is. Yeah. It's very harsh. It's very much like he knows that John's not going to be stopped by this prick. So Cassian and John have this face off, and this is where we get the scene where they're sort of like, one's like, I think John's up in like the higher walkway and Cassian's down the lower one, and they're sniping little. Oh, okay, but they're sniping little silencer pistol shots, and look, as there's people walking past. Yeah. There's nothing believable about it. It's kind of silly. It's fun from like a playful action scene perspective of like, if this was possible, this would be a fun little thing where they're trying to like assassinate each other in a crowded place. I do love I do love, because they're on opposite sides of the train platform, and they get on the train, and they have to sort of stand there and stare at each other while the train's full. And then the train empties at the next stop, and they get closer until they eventually start having this knife fight on the train. Yeah. I really like that. There's a nice build up. It's almost like they have to stop for the quiet tension, and they're just waiting for the chaos to hit again. That stuff is really entertaining. This is like a minor quibble. It doesn't bother me. I have never, because they both get on the same train from different sides, like they're on opposite platforms. I have never been at any kind of train station, right? Well, a subway, regular train station, where you can get onto the same train from either side. There's always two tracks, and for one train going that way, the other one going the other way. I've never been in a train platform where both sides can get on the same train car. I've never seen that in my life.
I'm not going to say that you're wrong. The only thing I could think where it would work is if it's a loop and the train's only traveling in one direction. However,
yeah, I can see that.
But this perfectly counters that, because they specifically say the stop at the end of the scene is the end of the line. So I'm going to go ahead and... Yeah,
but even tracks that are on a loop typically have two trains, one going either direction.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I don't know enough about the New York subway system.
I mean, the one in Glasgow's like that. It's basically just a circle, but you've got one going either way. You know?
I've been on the DC subway system, and it is exactly as you're describing it. One's going either way, and if you wanted to get on one going the other way, you'd have to go to the other platform. You'd have to go up the stairs and then down the other side. Yeah. So honestly, I think it's just a thing of, hey, why wouldn't they kill each other on the same platform if they both were about to board the same train?
No, don't get me wrong.
Had to put in this thing.
I'm cool with it, because once they get on the train, the scene where they're both sort of staring at each other with all these people in between them is great. It's a fun little tense moment. Yeah, I'm into it.
It's the Hitchcock bomb under the table thing, where we both know what's going to happen the moment they reach each other. It's the question of, when are they going to reach each other?
So they have this knife fight. This is one of the moments where I'm like, the people on the train that are left at either side of this car don't feel like they're backing away in horror like they should be. They're just kind of watching as this like violent knife fight's playing out.
Yes, but all of them are already like in the corners. Like there's these guys are keeping the fight pretty centralized, and they're in the corners. And then when the train finally stops, they sprint out as fast as possible.
Joe would have made this interesting to me, and I'm not complaining they didn't do it, but it does kind of feel like, because these guys are both professionals and they have a code and all the rest of it, I do get the impression that they wouldn't want to actually harm any innocent civilians, right, while they're doing this. And I do think it'd be interesting if at some point, like, civilians got in the way, and maybe it would have been interesting to see both of them go out of their way to, like, either, like, stop what was happening, like, both of them have got the code, so both of them would like stop what they're doing to like make sure the person who was maybe almost going to get accidentally shot or stabbed wouldn't get shot or stabbed. And it'd be this sort of like moment of, no, both of them agree on this. We don't hurt civilians. We keep like, that's one of the things that I think makes it easy to sort of let yourself get carried away with the violence in this, is that it's always other assassins that you're shooting at. It's always bad people with guns that are going to kill him if he doesn't do it first. It's never just...
Well, it was back during the first movie where Yosef kind of hid behind some of the people in like the bathhouse scene that were not at all
That's
part
true,
of the
yeah,
game.
that's right, yeah. And John obviously didn't shoot.
Right, but obviously Joseph wasn't part of the game. Like, he didn't have the code. He wasn't someone who was part of the whole hitman thing. So we got 50% of that. And it's obvious that John won't take the shot if it means getting his target, even if it means killing someone else. So there is at least some level of that where they're not hurting civilians. But it is a question of...
It's just in the same way that we've introduced all these rules, I just think it would have been interesting mechanically. And I guess it was kind of used in that they weren't just fighting when there's a crowd of people in between them.
Yeah.
But it would have been very interesting if, like, Cassian might have had the killing blow, but kind of had to stop, and he chose to stop because it would have meant hurting someone else.
I feel like the place where it would happen is probably a car chase scene. Where it's, maybe, okay, yeah. I have my target, but then traffic's in the way. What do I do?
Yeah. It could be interesting. Maybe they'll explore that more.
Yeah.
Later entries.
One scene that happened just before this, and I say one scene, it was that intercut scene of the 3 different hitmen trying to attack.
The violinist, sumo wrestler.
Sumo wrestler, and then just 2 random guys. But the 2 random guys were the ones who were killed by a pencil.
That's right, right.
Yeah. I think that it was exactly as we all imagined it to be, where he stabs one guy like through his ear and the other one at the base of his spinal cord.
Mm-hmm.
Just horribly violent, disgustingly gruesome, and absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so John Wick wins the fight, obviously. It's very even, but he ultimately wins. He does the thing that I liked in the first movie where he kind of hammers the knife in to sort of win the fight. He doesn't kill him, though. He makes a point of saying that if you pull that knife out, you'll bleed to death.
Yep.
But, you know...
I have looked at everyone's character pages, not everyone's, but a lot of character pages here of seeing what else they starred in. I am purposely avoiding commons because I don't want to know if he's going to show up in the next movie. I want that to be a surprise.
I could see him I could even see him be an ally down the line. Some camaraderie perhaps forming or whatever. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, from here, obviously John Wick, he's getting chased by more assassins, and he goes to hide randomly. It seems it's random in the moment where he goes to this homeless guy and says, "Hey, I need to speak to your leader."
But he gives him one of the coins.
He gives him one of the coins, yeah. And the guy does cover him up and like ends up killing the 2 assassins that are chasing John Wick, and takes him to Laurence Fishburne, who is the king of the homeless, who are a network of people who are basically acting as spies.
Which, like... I think I said last time how this movie, it has this whole thing of like the secret underground world where there's all these rules and the normal people don't know about it. I love this little extra twist where it's like, oh yeah, no, there are hitmen in this, but also the homeless are in on it as well. And like, I just imagine by the time we get to the next movie, it's like, oh, you really thought that waiters were just waiters?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the point where if you were wanting this to feel realistic, I think that all the homeless people are a network of secret spies is probably the point where it's like went over the line for you, because it's like we're in kind of absurd territory now. We see that he's putting, it's like he's got these people like taking like chips out of phones and like having pigeons fly them away to, I don't know, communicate or to confuse where certain people are, maybe, or something. I don't know.
Maybe. I know that SIM cards are used for like tracking, and also like the phone number itself is tied to a SIM card. So maybe it's just a matter of, I don't know.
Yeah. What's interesting here is that we find out that this character played by Laurence Fishburne, who's credited as the Bowery King, that's his title, he says that he actually encountered John Wick when he was much younger, and John Wick stabbed him in the neck and kind of gave him the same choice that Common had, effectively, where he's like, you can try and reach for your gun and I'll kill you, or, you know, you can keep that pressure on your neck and go and live. And clearly he did. So he's got this kind of interesting relationship with John Wick where obviously there's maybe a bit of a grudge for what he did to him, but at the same time he kind of, you know, made him a better, smarter, you know, person as a result. So John Wick's like, hey, this prick Santino is now on the table and he is going to try and take the city. He wants to like take over New York. He wants to be the head of everything in the crime world,
which is what the sister said he would do. During her original thing.
Which I think is kind of interesting. Even at that point in the movie, you're like, you know that this guy is going to benefit from this in a way that's bad for everyone, but John kind of has to go through with it, which arguably is even more of a reason for John to want to go and get revenge. It's like, it's not just about the revenge, it's about making sure this awful person doesn't then, gain control and make everyone's life a misery.
I do think there's an interesting way here that John at no point, except for when he was going after Gianna, has ever been just business. Like in the first movie, it was always vengeance. It was never business to him. And in this movie, it's either about getting vengeance on Santino for what he did, or, as you're saying, possibly more about like the greater good of trying to make it that. At no point is it ever, he has a job, he does the job, and he moves on, except for the Gianna scene.
Yeah, and even then he doesn't move on. He and I think that's the point, is that he doesn't want this to ever just be business again. He's too emotionally he's awoken
invested
from that, I guess. He's his life with his wife brought him away from that, and he can't just do that as a job anymore, I guess. So basically he says, look, if he becomes in power, you're going to end up going to war with him, right? And you're probably, even if you somehow survive, you're going to lose lots of men. There's going to be so much bloodshed.
And also, he is technically a member of the High Table, which will fight for their own.
And if you help me, I'll kill him, and they'll come after me. The table will be mad, but they'll come after me and not you, which is his incentive. So he gives him a gun, but only gives him 7 rounds. And he's like, 7 rounds? Well, it's a $7 million contract on your life. $1 million bullet. And what I love so much about this is that as soon as he gets this gun, I'm thinking, all right, they've told me 7 bullets. I love that mechanically. I love that, okay, each bullet's going to be so important. It's going to be so, we're going to count that how each time he uses one, each time's going to be a big deal.
Yep.
He walks into the art gallery where Santino is, and he uses all 7 bullets, and what I'm going to guess is less than 7 seconds. He just fires them all off, kills like 4 henchmen, and then just grabs one of their guns and goes to town. Like, I'm like, do you know what? That's right. He just takes one of their guns after he uses the 7 bullets. Makes perfect sense.
It really is just the perfect subversion of expectations there, where they specifically point out 7 bullets, and they hold on that for a while. They specifically have a period between when he gets the 7 bullets to the point where he starts firing. And it's probably a good 2-3 minute section. Not long enough that you've forgotten about the 7 bullets, but just long enough to make you think, okay, we're building up and it's going to be 1 bullet at a time. He's really got to pick his battles here. And then just immediately throws them away. Just like, all right, stop keeping count, you nerds. Start paying attention to the fight.
Well, and I think what's so good about this is that, and Santino thinks he's untouchable, and John goes to his art gallery opening. He just walks in, stares him down, and immediately starts coming for him. And we get the big fight scene that goes to the art gallery. He takes out a bunch of guards in some of the regular rooms. Obviously, it's when he gets to the fancy exhibit, which is the Hall of Mirrors, that things get really wacky.
Reflection of the soul, or something like that.
Yeah, Ruby Rose ends up getting stabbed eventually by the end of it. John,
now, I think Ruby Rose, they pretty much make the last person. She is the final. She's the big muscle that needs to be defeated at the end. Do you think she earned that position over the course of this movie?
I think she was a constant enough presence that seemed to be I mean, decently enough. Like she was less likable than because Cassian had a code. He was more of a kind of an interesting counterpart to John, where she was like, no, she clearly had it out from the second she ever laid her eyes on him. Yeah. That was kind of the idea.
She struck me as 100% devoted, maybe not to Santino himself, but at least to her job of defending Santino. And so she really wanted to prove herself. There's multiple times where she comes up to Santino and she's like, hey, I messed up. I'm going to fix this.
Yeah, and the scene's obviously a lot of fun, him going through the mirrors, and it gives you this really sort of weird futuristic setting in a John Wick movie, which is otherwise set in the real world. So you get this really, it's same with the rave, and even the caverns underneath Rome. Very different locations, very different sort of background and visuals, if nothing else, to have the action play out. But ultimately, it's after this where the real meat is. And, unlike the first movie, which had the guy you hated be killed half an hour before the end, and then there's this other stuff that comes after. No, the crescendo happens at the right time in this movie. We see Santino go into the Continental and basically say, is the boss here, and he goes up. And then John Wick comes in pretty much right after.
Well, I don't want to skip over this scene. Santino walks in and talks to Winston first, and basically starts making demands, and Winston's like, screw you. You can you get all the rules that anyone else gets, but you're not allowed to come in here and make demands. I think he asks for John to be excommunicated, and Winston's like, he didn't break any rules. And Winston's like, well, and Santino tells him, well, I can make this demand as a high table. And he's like, you can't do anything.
Yeah, you can't demand shit.
God here.
Yeah. No, which is satisfying. It makes you like Winston a bit, because obviously Winston at least sticks to his rules. Like, he's very consistent. He sticks to the rules he set out. He clearly likes John. He clearly gives John advice when he thinks he needs it, as best he can. So John comes in. He wants to see Santino, and he comes up to, you know, the lounge sort of area where he's sitting, and he's sitting eating duck, and he basically is making a point here where Santino's like, he puts a bit of duck in his mouth, like, oh, it's so good. The menu's great here. I could eat here every day for a long time and never eat the same thing twice. And he's basically saying, I'm a chicken shit, and I'm going to hide in the Continental where you can't kill me. And I think what's so great about this is the whole point of this character is that he is this entitled guy who thinks he can be protected by his status, by the family that he was born into, and he's saying, I'm untouchable, and, you know, in a kind of like, I'm a 1%er kind of way almost, right? Yeah. Which is why it's so effing satisfying when John Wick doesn't even let him finish his sentence. He just shoots him in the head and just kills him. And you can tell, like, when he walks in with a gun in his hand, Winston's like, John, like, he knows that there's a chance that he might break the rule here. Like, he knows that John respects the rules, but he knows that John's pissed enough that he's like, it doesn't matter what the rules are, the consequences are coming for you. You're not untouchable. You think you're untouchable. And I think that's why this kill's so satisfying. There is something cathartic about someone powerful thinking they're untouchable and can get away with anything, only for the hero to say, no, you're not.
I think what hit me the most for this kill is not only that catharsis hitting you, but at the exact same time, that feeling of dread.
Oh yeah, like the
we
consequences.
know what happens. We've seen it in the last movie. We know what happens when you're excommunicated. So not only are you happy for John that he's like, yes, you did it, at the same moment you're just going, at what cost?
Which again, they set up over the two movies how much of a big deal this is. You do not fight, you do not kill in the Continental, and he's just broken that rule. And it means something because they've really built it up over the two movies. So he's basically
gets his dog.
Yeah, he goes and gets his dog. He's like, okay, you know, come for me whenever. And Lance Reddick comes and picks him up and drives him. And I think it actually is the same location that Perkins was killed in the first movie. Not the exact same, because they're more at the fountain, but in the background you can see kind of the arches. I think that was the same location.
It might be. I don't know.
I think it was the same location, just a little bit, you know, further out. But you know, I think you can see where she was killed in the background. Anyway, and this is the thing, like, the demeanor here is very different. Like, you can tell that Winston understands why he did what he did, but he's like, look, these are the rules. You're excommunicated. The contract on you's been doubled, so it's not 7 million now; it's 14 million. But I've put a delay on it, right? Because he respects him, because he understands him. He's like, look, the contract's not live until 60 minutes. You've got an hour. You've got an hour before every assassin is coming for you, because now you're a high valuable target. And presumably some of them also really believe in the system and like care about defending the Continental, probably. So maybe there's some sort of maybe some of them might care more.
Idealists.
Yes, idealists. Some of them might care more than just the money. And it makes a point here that everyone here is an assassin, because they all stop moving.
God, that scene caught me so off guard, because it is, you know, it's a public place. There are just, everyone's walking around, everyone looks completely different from each other, and then Winston basically just nods his head, one person makes a call, and then everyone in eyeshot stops and just stares at John. And it's just, I think that's when, because up till this point in the movie, John was feeling pretty invincible, and he accepted there would be consequences, but I think that he still thought, and I will get through all of that too, like, and I will be able to take on anybody who comes after me.
I mean, I think he says, like, you know, to whoever they send, I'll kill them. Like, I'll kill them all.
He says that after this part as well, but I think there's a moment where John is genuinely shook, and he realizes, like, oh, I even I can't handle this. And this is too much.
And he also makes it clear that you can't go to our armorers anymore. You can't go to any of our facilities. You can't get any supplies from us. You get no help from the system anymore. He's on his own. He's rogue.
Which is specifically why I think the Bowery King is going to be a bigger thing
I
in
can
the
see
third
that.
movie, because he seems to be outside of the established system.
So it does a great job of, because the end of the movie is just him running, as members of the public may or may not be assassins as he's going through the park,
Yeah, he goes through the park and people are just checking their phones and then like looking up at him, and he's taking that as a sign of everyone is about to kill me.
Yeah. Honestly, like, part of me, and I mean, obviously it was a right choice not to do this, but part of me even wanted like a 5-year-old to look up at him. Like, even the 5-year-old might be an assassin.
I mean, I think they could have pulled it off. It was just the 5-year-old looking at him as he was sprinting down, but it didn't have to be 5-year-old looks at his phone and then like reaches behind his back or something like that.
Yeah, but it ends with him running with the dog. So it kind of ends with a similar shot to the first movie, but this time it's in daylight. He's running. He's scared. The dog's keeping up with him impressively. So. Yeah, no, I mean, as far as setup for the third, I remember finishing this the first time I watched it and going, you know what, I'm kind of hyped for the third one. And I said that as someone who watched the first one and was a little underwhelmed because the hype was too big. I got to the end of the second one and went, you know what, no, I'm game for a third one. I'm kind of excited about where they're going with this.
Which is why I have to ask, because you said you never watched the third one. Why did you not? What kept you from completing the hype?
I just never got around to it. I don't know. It came out because I saw 2 when it came out, pretty much. So it wasn't there ready to watch. Where I mean 2 wasn't ready to watch when I started. I saw the first one a little bit in advance as well. But like, I don't know. It came out, and for whatever reason, I think. I don't know. I can't remember. I never got around to it, and then here we are.
I know that I'm going to be watching this within the next 3 days, just because of our filming schedule here. But I couldn't imagine seeing that ending and then saying, yeah, third one came out, I'll catch it eventually, instead of like how does he escape this?
I mean, I'm looking forward to watching it on in a few days' time. Like, I'm excited to finally see it. And then if the third one ends in a cliffhanger, then great, because the fourth is like right behind it.
See, I feel like the third one is probably going to do the same thing the first one did, where it wraps up its relevant plots, but just leaves 1 or 2 things that could be expanded on.
Because 4 and 5 are greenlit together, and maybe even shot back to back, I feel like 4 might end with like a cliffhanger.
Like the same sort of cliffhanger, yeah.
I could see 4 and 5 feeling like a 2-parter as well.
Oh, yeah.
But, I think this... It expanded the world, which we've said repeatedly. I think it played with its mechanics, and it always felt like John's being challenged, and he ultimately breaks the rule because... And it feels like the right thing to do in the moment for the audience, I think. I think the audience are like, no, just get him. Because
it feels like the right thing to do because it's an abuse of the rules.
Yes.
He's taking advantage of this rule that was never supposed to be used as a permanent... like stay away from the killing. You were always supposed to check out of the hotel.
It's funny that obviously this is the criminal underworld system and all that, but it's kind of funny how it mirrors the real world system, in that he's using the system and hiding behind it to keep safe when everyone knows he is guilty. He's deserving of everything that is coming for him, but he's hiding behind the system. So even inside this like subset underworld where it's the criminal and the hitman and all this stuff, there's still corruption in it, and there's still like a need to sort of like break it down and sort of rebuild it, and so it's satisfying to see John Wick do that. So yeah, I
mean, I would have to assume, based off of this movie and then going into the next movie, that the general plot would be going against the high table itself. I think that that's the only way that because the only reason he got off of his $7 million contract is because he killed the person who put it on him. So the only way he's going to get out of this $14 million contract is to kill the high table, because they're the ones who put it on him. And now that he is excommunicated, there's nothing really stopping him from doing that. There's no code of honor against like attacking higher ups or anything like that.
I mean, I definitely think we're going to get to that point by the 5th movie. I don't know if the 3rd one's going to be him going after the table, but I definitely see it happening.
That's fair.
I could definitely see it.
I guess besides it being a general survive the world attacking you movie, I wonder who the main sort of antagonist would be.
Oh, that's a good question. I know Halle Berry's in the next one.
Okay.
I don't know what she's playing though. I don't know who she is.
Didn't Ballerina get greenlit off of 3? Because obviously in this movie, nothing related to Ballerina came out. Like, there is no character that would have been.
That's not Halle Berry, though. That's
not Halle Berry?
No. I want to say it's Ana de Armas, but I could be wrong. I think they confirmed that John Wick's going to be in that movie.
I would think so. It's the best way to do a spin-off, so.
Yeah. Well, they don't always do that, though. Sometimes it'll just be like, okay, it's loosely connected because of this plot point, but it's mostly going to just be this new character. Yeah. Like, they sometimes do that.
But that's always the weakest kind of spin-off, in my opinion, where it's like, oh, it's over there, and our character's over here, and whatever.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they do that. Maybe it's not... John Wick 2's review is not the time to speculate that, but I'm just wondering how they like alter the fighting style a bit for someone who's even more sort of small, athletic, and quick, potentially. Like, I could see them really playing with that in the action scenes.
Yeah.
Because
it's probably going to be a lot less flipping and holding down people.
I mean, as quick as John Wick is, he's still a man in his 50s, whereas this is going to be like a woman, like, not even in her 30s yet. So I can see it being a lot more agile, I suppose, is maybe what I'd say.
I guess my one hope is that it is still choreography based and doesn't go into like spy stuff.
Oh, I'd hope so too. I would expect so. But
anyway, this movie.
Yeah, pretty good. I think it takes all the strengths of the first one. I think it adds to them. I think ultimately I felt the pacing was better. I think it crescendoed exactly when it was supposed to. I think even though I would say that the character in the first movie was a bit more of a scumbag, that I'd say I hated him more, the villain, the main one who killed the dog. I think in this movie, the actual kill of the villain is more satisfying. I think the actual moment is better.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was just our complaint from last movie, is that the kill of the main quote-unquote villain in the first movie was completely in the wrong spot. It didn't feel as big as it should have. But this one, it, like you said, pacing-wise, perfect spot for it. And the fact it wasn't a fight scene. We just got done with a huge fight scene. We had our big moments in that. This was a single shot, and that's all it needed to be. And
it shouldn't have been a fight scene. Like, and that was one of the other complaints about the last movie, is that they had this fight scene at the end with a character who didn't feel like they set up could do this. So it made sense this guy was just a slimy weasel who was hiding behind a shield, only for John to say, I don't give a shit about your shield.
Yeah.
So, that's satisfying. So, no, it was a good time.
One thing I wanted to bring up, it never fit in anywhere. John didn't name the dog.
No, he didn't. He kept being asked and he never named it.
Yeah, that's surprising to me. And maybe points towards more of it's only been like a few days rather than a month. But I did expect by the time we got to the end of this movie, the dog would have a name. I thought like Lance Reddick's character would have given him a name somehow. Yeah,
maybe he'll name him at the end of the third one or something. It'll be like a big climactic point where he's like, you know what, I'm going to name my dog and then name him after
Helen 2.
Yeah, so no, I guess it's time to rate the movie, but it's a really solid sequel that I think ups all the right things. It is technically a little more cartoony in some ways, but I actually welcomed that because I thought the first one was a bit too self-serious, so...
Yeah, I think the first one did a good job of bringing people... It started as a drama and then got to the point of, okay, but like you're invested in the character because of that dramatic elements, so then we can just do full action. This movie just took advantage of the fact of, we already got you hooked in the first movie. You know what this character's about. We're just going to lay on the action.
Yep, yeah. All right, what are you rating John Wick Chapter 2?
All right, so I gave the last one an 8, and I do think that this one is better. I do think that this one, with the world building, I love every aspect of that. I'm always a sucker for that sort of stuff. As long as it remains consistent and doesn't seem too outlandish, I will always give that credit. Again, the only minor nitpick I had here is that I felt the choreography was less about the fighting itself and more about the place it was taking place in, but that's just kind of what I want to see out of it. It's not an inherent negative within itself. So overall, I'm going to give this one 8.5. Still not quite breaching the 9, but it was definitely a slight mark above the last one.
Yeah, I give the last one a 7. It's very solid. Obviously, a lot of great qualities. I am going to go with an 8 for this one. I think this is this one sort of dips up into great territory, which is where I kind of see an 8, and I think it just feels like a more full-fledged movie. It was more like I came out of it, even if you can technically nitpick a few like little things, I came out of it feeling much more satisfied without any big criticisms of like, oh, like the ending felt a bit weird or whatever. So, yeah, 8 out of 10 from me. Best of the franchise so far. I mean, it's only 2 in, admittedly, but
question.
Yeah.
Is it a cut above, or does it make the cut? I don't think we're going to argue for below that. But
no, I think it just makes the cut. I don't think it's a cut above.
All right, fair enough. I think that if it's strange in that I'm putting my hopes on the third one, but if the third one managed to just perfectly stick the landing, I would almost go back and say that the entire thing needs to be a cut above. Like, I could see this being just one of those movie series that is absolutely, like, has to be a part of a collection, but it only works if the entirety of the plot manages to work together.
Interesting. Well, we'll see. I don't know. I've not seen the third one. This will be fresh for both of us. And then we watch 4 with the rest of the world and see how that is. But, yeah. Don't worry, like, even though we're doing all these together, when the 5th one comes out, when the spin-off comes out, we will at various points slot in standalone movies that are sequels to franchises that we've already done, because we can't do them again. That'd be silly. So don't worry, like, future sequels will happen. They'll just be sort of like little standalones in between other seasons in the future.
Still waiting for that Dirty Harry 5?
6.
Damn.
It's not even been that long. You've already forgotten there was 5 of those.
I mean, wasn't the last one the one with the dog in it? Or was that...
No, that was 4.
Forgetting one? There's too many. There were too many.
5 was the toy car chase.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I don't regret forgetting that.
It's the best scene in cinematic history. How dare you forget that toy car chase?
Oh, I do want to point out Laurence Fishburne's wonderful delivery of like 6 different lines in this movie, but more specifically the "Somebody please get this man a gun." That was the best line read of this whole movie, hands down.
Yeah. And then it was stolen by Marvel a couple of movies later when they're like, "Get this man a shield."
Well.
Oh dear. Alright, that's John Wick Chapter 2. Let us know what you think of this one in the comments. Like, subscribe, ding the bell, all that stuff. Obviously worth mentioning, you can get a bonus episode over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, $3 and up. The bonus movie to go along with this month's stuff was Peppermint, starring Jennifer Garner. And we also have a second bonus show monthly called Extra Reels, Collector's Cut Extra Reels, where we do like a So Bad It's Good B movie. So there'll be a few of those episodes up by now. So yeah, go back and get the back catalogue of the bonus episodes, plus bonus stuff for other shows like The Screams After Midnight and the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which are the other shows that come from Mail Fuzz Movies. Go check out those podcasts if you haven't. Yeah, you can get all that over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. I will thank our Patreon producers while I'm saying that as well. So thank you very much to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, Board Now, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Al Treisman. And thank you to all our patrons for supporting the content. You can, of course, support everything by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell for notifications, or, of course, rating the podcast 5 stars on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts from. All of that is good stuff. And you can get us on Twitter at StreamsMidnight. Check the description for all the relative links and whatnot. But that is the show. That is the Collector's Cut. We are halfway through our John Wick season, so
only growing from here.
Yep. So thank you very much once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and I don't have any quotes from this one to use.
Somebody please get this man a quote.